Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Starjump Station. I'm your host, Starjump Grim. We're continuing with another video today, kind of leading into Citcon, which is only, I think, about 12 or 13 days away, depending on when I publish this video. But we're kind of covering a few topics sort of leading up to the show in anticipation of getting more official information on a few of these things. The last video I did a few days ago covered a lot of the Star Citizen ship news that was starting to leak out. Again, some of those ships we knew about for a while, some are, we're getting new information on, but again, a lot of stuff coming about Star Citizen ships. The next thing I wanted to talk about, though, was something that was mentioned in regards to Citcon, which is that the CIG will be talking about what's beyond 4.0 for Star Citizen. So I thought it would be really cool to cover what I think should be in a Star Citizen 1.0, right? What is needed for this game to reach a minimal viable product, something that could be public facing, that could stand up on its own, have enough gameplay to be considered a real game, be relatively stable, and compete with the other games that are out there. Because again, with this being an MMO, we're going to need players, right? We're going to need even more players than we currently have in Star Citizen, by probably a large margin, right? So with this being an MMO, how do we bring those players in? Again, we need a lot of variety. We need stable systems. We need engaging gameplay, all that kind of good stuff. So I thought it would be really cool to break all that down and talk about it. Now, I will say this is the second time I've recorded this episode. The first time I recorded it, I had a much larger chart. You can maybe see that here. That chart took a long time to get through. By the time I was done recording the video, it was somewhere around 50 minutes long. So I took a look at that and I said, okay, I need to shorten this. I need to break down the different things I think that are needed for the game in a little bit more of a simplified way, which means you sort of have to put some milestones in there that are a little bit more like catch-alls. However, I think I've done that. I've got a new chart. It's going to be easier for us to walk through, and hopefully will give you a good idea of what I think should be in Star Citizen 1.0. Now, you may have a different opinion. There may be things in this list that you don't agree with. You may have ideas that I didn't think about, because again, there's so many parts and pieces to this game. It's hard to remember it all and bring it all together to create some sort of graph like this. So if you have ideas for what should be in Star Citizen 1.0, if you have something that you think I missed, please put it in the comments below. I would love to hear about it, because if you remind me of things or features that I forgot to put in here, I want to put them in here and update this chart. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and jump right into what I think should be in Star Citizen 1.0. All right, first up, I broke these down into three categories: critical, important, and moderate. Now, critical are the things that I think must be in Star Citizen 1.0, and if they're not, then they should not launch the game. Okay, so again, I consider these absolute critical things that need to be in Star Citizen 1.0. The next group I just label as important. These are very important things, obviously, as the name suggests. However, they can be brought in at maybe an 80% level of completion or a 90% level of completion. Maybe there's some still, a few bits of polish that need to be done to it, maybe an extra level or two of depth. But in general, all these things are very much needed for a 1.0 product. They just maybe don't have to be, completely finished in their development, but they need to be far enough along and have enough depth and engaging content within them that it feels complete, right? For the most part. And then finally, there's the moderate category. Now, moderate just simply means that we do need this stuff, but we need it in varying degrees. We could have some of this stuff at a tier 1 level, maybe some of it's at a tier 2 level. We do need it, but its level of completion can vary pretty wildly. And part of that is because I see some of these things maybe coming in a patch post-release, additional industrial gameplay focus patch, that comes along after launch sometime, or a post-launch patch that focuses on, hacking and data and stuff like that. Okay. So they're all, all this stuff is really needed for a 1.0, but I do think we need to be realistic and sort of break these down into several different categories. Critical must-haves, important really need to haves, and moderate, let's just get as much as we can. And again, hopefully when I go through this list, you'll sort of see what I'm thinking. And then, like I said, you'll think of a bunch of stuff you're thinking and maybe add it to the list by putting it down in the comments. I'll read it and we can just sort of keep updating this graph as we go along. Okay, let's go into critical first, okay? So with critical, first and foremost, server meshing. We need it. We already know we need it. I personally think we need dynamic server meshing. The players, again, minimum 500, but I think we need more. But I think minimum 500 could be viable for a 1.0 release. Again, that's probably on the low side. And then CIG is going to have some sort of internal system set up for 24/7 engineer, sort of strike teams to help support the world being up when this game goes live. You've seen it with World of Warcraft and Blizzard. You need those groups that are essentially monitoring the world environment, the server environment, 24/7, ready to fix things at a moment's notice, right? Because one of the things that does hurt games when they first release are bad launches, right? Next thing on the list, we need a ton of optimization in Star Citizen. That should go without saying, okay? That could be everything from additional culling, viz area optimizations, and a big one I've been thinking about a lot lately with hearing Benoit's posts on server mesh and testing is the spreading out the player base. It really sounds like the hangars are becoming a bottleneck, so we need to spread that player base out. Again, that will tie into base building and new home locations and logging in and logging out, persistence, all that, but we need to optimize this game, okay? Next one, permanent persistence. And what I mean by that is when you log in and log out of the game, you are where you left your character. You're no longer getting resets. There is things like rollback recovery and progress retention, okay? Progress retention on your items that you collect, the ships that you buy, the reputation that you earn, all that stuff. Next, CIG will need to, bolster their customer service, customer support kind of apparatus, right? We're going to also need things and additional tools, put into our hands to help with the whole, back and forth with customer service. So for example, we need in-game reporting and ticket system. We need formalized processes for engaging with customer support. We need to understand things like, what brings a suspension or ban to a player. Again, there's a lot more there, but you can see where I'm going. We need a more robust and formalized customer support system, okay, that can stand up to a full game release, right? We are going to need, obviously, and this is something that's been talked about quite a bit, but we're going to need a really engaging new player experience, okay? That's got to have everything from an introduction narrative to in-game world building, right? We need to understand the world we're playing in and the lore. Maybe you've never played Squadron 42. At that, when we get to the Star Citizen 1.0 release period, maybe you've never played Squadron 42. You don't know the backstory. So we need some of that in Star Citizen to kick you off. We're going to need tutorials and hints and just all the other stuff that go along with a new player experience. Star Citizen's a massive game. There's a lot of overhead in terms of just, things you need to know. So the new player experience is going to be critical to bringing new players in and then keeping those players, okay? And then when we go into that idea of player retention, we go into that next critical thing, progression, okay? We need progression variety, meaning we need a lot of different ways to progress through this game, whether you're a combat person, an industrial person, someone who just wants to role play, someone who wants to make a lot of money, whatever. We need progression variety, okay? We also need meaningful progression. So what does that mean? It means when you earn something, it feels like it matters, right? It's got to have some value to it, okay? Whether you're earning a ship or earning a blueprint that allows you to build some sort of really cool manufacturing facility, or maybe you're earning reputation that lets you climb higher in the ranks of the transport guild or whatever. We need meaningful progression that you will keep coming back for, okay? And then another really important thing we need for progression is an end game. We need to understand what the vision is for Star Citizen's end game. My personal opinion on it is that I think manufacturing will be the end game, right? Crafting, base building, and manufacturing. I think that is, when I look at those three things, if you step back from it, you'll notice that all the other gameplay loops can and probably will tie into those three in some major ways. Okay, whether you're into science or exploration or salvaging or mining or transporting, they can all tie in to manufacturing and base building, okay? And probably crafting to some degree, but especially manufacturing and base building. And I could see manufacturing and base building being, being a high level in-game goal. I think there should be others. I just see that as being a very important in-game gameplay loop, okay? Okay, so again, ran through those pretty quickly. You saw my previous chart. I had a lot more stuff down for critical with a lot more subcategories. Obviously, there's a lot there. There's probably a lot more Cortex stuff, for example, that's really, really important. But I wanted to sort of boil it down and simplify it down to 6 things that I thought were super critical for a Star Citizen 1.0 release, okay? Now let's go ahead and talk about the important category. Okay, the important category. This is stuff, again, that really needs to be in Star Citizen 1.0, but it can kind of come in at like an 80 or 90% finished level, in my opinion, okay? We need to have some of it there for every single one of these categories, but maybe not fully developed, completely finished. I think they can launch with this mostly fleshed out, but with new additions and new features coming to these things, in a post-release patch. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm just going to talk about the player entity, right? And again, some of this stuff has already been in development or is already released in a really nice place. So, when I start going through some of the stuff, just understand that. With the player, we're going to need higher levels of actor status. That is including everything from hygiene to medical to eating, drinking, just the overall health of your character, okay? How you're affected by weather, oxygen, all that kind of stuff. We need a robust character creator that focuses on bringing, diversity and lots of customization. Again, we just got that recently, so that's really great to see. And then ultimately, we need a sense of identity. What do I mean by that? We need a way to feel special in this verse, right? In this universe. Other MMOs do this through class and specialization, right? So you're not just a healer, you might be a paladin healer, right? And that allows you to sort of feel special within the sea of other players, right? Star Citizen's going to need to do something in that regard. And while we don't have classes, we're going to need enough intricacies in how we progress our character to make us feel special within the sea of other players. I do think that's really important for massively multiplayer online games, okay? People want to feel special in these type of, worlds. Okay, so that's the player stuff. Again, a lot more there I could go into. You saw the previous chart. Next, ships, okay? Ships are very important to Star Citizen. They're one of the core ways we interact with the world around us, okay? With ships, we need role variety, something CIG's already been really good at. We have lots of different types of ships. We need utility and usability in those ships, meaning every ship that's in this game when 1.0 launches needs to be useful and actually work and function and have a point to them, okay? For example, we can't have a refinery ship in the game for Star Citizen 1.0 if they haven't gotten refinery gameplay in, okay? That can't happen. The next thing, I really think that every ship that launches with Star Citizen 1.0 needs to be at a gold standard level, okay? That doesn't mean completely bug-free or every issue knocked out, but they need to be at a gold standard level that a player can reliably use them without much issue, okay? Death of a Spaceman, our third one. This is a big one, though. We need to figure out more about Death of a Spaceman, or be told more about Death of a Spaceman, okay? And we've gotten a lot of information on it in the past, but we really need to hear more about inheritance, how it ties in with insurance and imprints. We need to understand what the true effects of progression loss will be, whether it's through reputation, items, UEC, all that kind of stuff. Fourth one, economy, okay? This is super important. We need to understand what CIG's vision for the economy here is. One of the biggest things I would love to hear CIG talk about is a marketplace, okay? Essentially an auction house where players can list items for sale and other players can purchase them from that marketplace, okay? We also need an escrow system for services rendered or things being purchased. It would be great to have some sort of escrow system where we can safely do transfers out there in the verse without fear of perhaps losing money in a bad deal or something. You could still do that if you just wanted to send your money via the Mo Trader app or whatever, but it would be really great if there was some sort of escrow service available that took a small percentage that would allow us to do some of that buying and selling with confidence, right? That's going to encourage more people to buy and sell, and I do think we need that. We also need an economy that is both NPC and player driven, okay? We haven't quite seen that yet. We know CIG wants to do it. Okay, fifth thing, org tools. This is a big one. We need in-game org support. We also need org admin tools, okay, with ranks and permissions and all that kind of stuff. And then last but not least, we just definitely need some sort of org ship flagging system, right? You need to be able to have ships that are flagged for the org for certain permission levels to pull out of the org hangar, okay? Moving on, chat. We really need to build up of the chat system. We're going to need org chat, okay? We need additional filters for chat. And then one thing, again, this is one of those things that I don't think necessarily has to be in a 1.0, but I do think CIG really needs to consider it, and that is radio emulation or some sort of radio emulation for Star Citizen. If you've ever played Arma 3 and used the add-ons Acre or Task Force Arrowhead Radio, you will know what radio emulation is in a game. Those are absolute game changers for Arma, and they really can tie into other systems really nicely. And I could see CIG doing radio emulation in Star Citizen and tying it into ships and their communications capabilities and all that stuff in really, really cool ways. Next, reputation, okay? We've heard a lot about reputation recently as CIG has put more factions into the game, but what I'm talking about here is we need personal reputation, player reputation, and criminal history. Okay, what am I talking about? We as players, we need to know who we're dealing with out there. Okay, we need to know when risk is there, and we need to know if risk needs to be mitigated, etc. So personal reputation, in my opinion, would be reputation that you earn in game. Okay, so if you're doing missions for the Cargo Transport Guild, then you're earning reputation with them. Okay, we've seen that. It's sort of in game now. The next thing would be player reputation. That would be some sort of metric by which other players can see where you fall on the reliability scale. Okay, this is a little bit more of a controversial one. Again, I've heard from people who say this would be a bad idea. I'm a little split on it, but I could see a lot of benefit to it. In lieu of that, if we didn't have something where individual players are rated and we can see that rating, then a different option or a way CIG could implement it in a really interesting way is to display a player's criminal history. Okay, maybe when you scan a ship and you scan a player, you can get their criminal history, and that would be really nice because you could start to judge who you're dealing with by seeing that criminal history. And maybe after a certain period of time, a criminal history gets wiped, but it would be a really interesting system to integrate into the game, just for how we deal with each other. Next, insurance. Okay. We need to understand more about this. We need to understand the different types of coverage plans. We need to understand how it will affect ship recovery and item recovery. Okay. Big deal. Another one here, obviously we've heard this one a lot, solar systems. How many do we have for a 1.0 launch? I personally think we need 5 systems at launch. Any lower than that, and it really runs the risk of looking, the game runs the risk of looking kind of bad in the gaming, circles where you have games like Starfield and stuff who have thousands of systems. We have a lot more depth in our systems here in Star Citizen, obviously, but I still think we need to launch with enough that it feels like there's something there. Okay, so I think 5 systems at launch minimum. We also need tons of points of interest. This is something CIG has been doing like crazy in Stanton and Pyro, so I don't see that, going anywhere, but lots of points of interest, space stations, caves, outposts, all that kind of stuff. And then ultimately variety. Pyro can't be just another Stanton, and Nyx can't be another Pyro. We're going to need a lot of variety, okay, in those 5 systems that launch with the game or more. Perhaps, maybe it'll be more. We'll see. We also need gameplay synergy. What is gameplay synergy? That is when one profession can tie into another profession, right? So mining tying into refinery gameplay. We also need to have professions tie into the economy, right? So the more people mining an area, the less, the less value ore has in that particular system, right? So we need an effect on the economy by the professions being done. Okay. And then ultimately we need unique combinations. And I think that's needed to make gameplay interesting and keep people engaged past the initial, launch. Okay. So what would the unique combinations be? Well, perhaps someone could combine mining and refinery and science gameplay into some sort of little loop where they can create some cool rare element or what have you, right? Something like that. This is very similar, I think, to how people maybe in World of Warcraft would build unique talent builds or something, right? We have to allow players, for this game to have any longevity, we're going to have to do something that allows players to have some sense of agency over the game where they can kind of like do things that maybe no one else thought of. Okay. Even if it's very rare for that to happen, we still need to allow a path for the player to feel that way. Right. Okay. Next one, data. Data is going to be big in Star Citizen, whether you're a data runner or you're selling data or you're storing data or all that kind of stuff, data, right? And I think it's going to be through physicalization. So data is going to be physicalized. And with that, we need to understand things like how data is collected. Once it's collected, who owns it? If you scan a space station that you don't own and you gather a bunch of data from it, and you have that data or that information on some sort of hard drive or card or whatever, let's say you're boarded and someone steals that card from you. Did they steal anything from you? Like, do you own that data? Again, understanding how that's going to all work, because I do think that's going to play in heavily to other gameplay loops. Next, beacons. We need, a lot more stuff going on with beacons. We need different beacon types, again, org beacons, all that kind of stuff. We need custom beacons. We need to essentially build our own beacons, okay? And then we need broadcast filters. We need to be able to put beacons out that maybe only broadcast to players of certain reputation levels or, again, that type of stuff, okay? We need to be able to control the beacon thing a bit more and have more agency over that and make a more flexible system than what we currently have, obviously. And then finally, for the important set of things that need to be in 1.0 is ship multi-crew support, okay? We've heard a lot about this from CIG though, so no worries here. We need operator modes, we need resource management, and we do need bed logging, okay? Or if not bed locking, some other system very similar, but we're going to need something like that. Okay. Push through those pretty quickly. Now let's move over to the moderate category. Okay, everyone. So with the moderate category, these are things that need to be in the game in some degree for a 1.0 release, but maybe not fully in the game. Okay, maybe it's just the tier 1 or what have you. I'm going to run through these kind of quick. You can see my subcategories on here. I'll go ahead and tell you now that on the bottom of every single one of these things in moderate, you will see I put gameplay, progression, and depth. All these things are going to need some level of gameplay, some level of progression, and some level of depth applied to them. Okay, so let's run through these real quick. We need a fleshed out law and order system, complete with system laws, in-game punishment, prison, etc. We need a medical loop. Okay, we need a mining loop, salvage loop, refueling loop, refining loop. We need transport gameplay, bounty hunter gameplay. We need probably some sort of tier 1 exploration gameplay loop, but I can see that being something that comes later, or at least gets iterated on later. We're obviously going to need a base building, crafting, and manufacturing gameplay loop. Going back to what I previously said, I really look at those as being the end game of Star Citizen, okay? That's going to be very important, okay? And I think that's what people build up to, you know, when they're starting out, is that sort of dream of building some big manufacturing thing or some big base, right? Farming loop. I actually think the farming loop is just an sort of an iteration on base building and crafting. You're essentially crafting crops and you're doing it from a farm, which is, you know, kind of like a base in a way. So sort of like an iterative thing there. We're also going to need a science gameplay loop, a passenger transport gameplay loop, the data running loop, and of course a hacking loop. That sort of encompasses all the gameplay loops. I guess you could call them professions, but they're kind of all the gameplay loops within Star Citizen that I think need to be represented in some way for 1.0. Again, at varying degrees. For example, what do I mean by that? Well, that might mean that you have mining, salvage, refueling, and cargo transport at a high level of polish for 1.0. But then maybe crafting and farming and science are like a tier 1. Passenger loop is not even in there, maybe even, right? It depends on if there's passenger transport ships in the game, right? But maybe it comes in a post-release patch. These are all important things, but they can be developed at varying levels, you know, of completion. I do think, though, that within a year of the game launching, within a year of Star Citizen 1.0, I think that all of these gameplay loops need to be represented in Star Citizen, okay? Because they're all important. And the reason you don't want to wait too awful long on any one of these is that, going back to my original comment on gameplay synergy, you want them all to sort of have hooks and tie-ins to each other. And it's going to be a lot harder to bring in new things that tie into the other stuff later. I mean, you can definitely do it. Don't get me wrong. There's games that do that all the time where they bring in new professions and new functions and stuff like that. You can definitely do it. But every time you do it, it upsets the economy a little bit, right? It makes the game a little wonky for a bit. So the more of this, you know, the more of this you can get in at the beginning, the better, right? Okay, so that being said, you can see this, you see where I've kind of mapped this out at. Obviously, there's 1,001 different opinions. There's probably a lot more stuff that could be here. Again, these were highly simplified. I'll go ahead and throw up the old chart. There it is. I'll go ahead and throw up the old chart there so you can see where I was. I had a lot more subcategories in there, so there's a lot more going on. Again, simplified it for this one. But we'll see what CIG says at Citcon, right? I think they're going to talk about their vision for Star Citizen 1.0. It'll be interesting to hear, you know, hear what their idea of it is and how much meat needs to be on that bone for a viable commercial release. And then based off that information, maybe we'll get some sort of idea of how long the road is ahead of us for a 1.0 release. I still think they have a long way to go. There's a lot that's not in the game that needs to be in the game. And we haven't even talked about some of just the basic stuff like stability, right? Talked a little bit like optimization, but stability will be another big one, right? That I didn't even put in here because a game always has bugs even when they release. It's just something that a game company is going to always have to sort of be working on. But we're going to need a certain level of stability for a 1.0 release, right? So again, a lot there. Very excited to hear what CIG has to say at CitizenCon. We're only like a little over a week and a half away or so before it starts. You can definitely expect Starjump to have a lot of coverage of CitizenCon when it comes out. We're going to break down every new ship, all the announcements. Obviously, we're going to get this stuff into Starjump Fleet Viewer and Hangar.link. I'll have those links down below, by the way. We'll get the new ships into those platforms as soon as possible. We know you all be eager to add those to your fleet. It's an exciting time. Lots of really cool news coming up. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the verse.